But the spending review and the Fiscal Commission's forecast make three things brutally clear. First of all, the Scottish economy under SNP management has underperformed, not just its long-term performance, but underperformed the UK average. And that would be bad enough if that was just meant that Scottish workers were earning less and had fewer job opportunities than they should. But it's even worse because income tax devolution means that there are hundreds of millions of pounds less to spend on frontline public services than if income tax had not been devolved at all. 400 million less for next year alone. Second, after 15 years in charge, the SNP have suddenly woken up to the need for public service reform and modernisation, except they've left it so late that there's no vision or strategy as to how the apparent efficiencies will be made. Just 4 vague references to shared services and reforms. It all sounds very similar to things being proposed down in Westminster by the Tories that they're so quick to criticise. The Cabinet Secretary indeed has used the word reset endlessly in recent days, but every time she says it, she means cutting jobs, cutting public services and passing the buck yet again to local councils to make those cuts. Thirdly, and make no mistake, this spending review does mean cuts, deep cuts to critical services. 7% cuts over 5 years to local services. So it is inevitable that class sizes will rise. Local roads will deteriorate, parks will be left to rust, and libraries will close. And it's not just councils taking the brunt of these cuts. Our colleges, our universities will see resources slashed, which means that we won't have the ability to grow the skills that is so clear from the data that our economy needs. Now, if the SNP are saying that health jobs will be protected, then it is ultimately abundantly clear, as Douglas Lumsden was pointing out in his speech, that that means huge cuts to the rest. Half of the job increases through the COVID period have been in the health service. So if those cuts are to be made in other places in the health service, that means up to 8,000 job losses from central government. That's a third. 1 in 20 jobs in local government at risk. So while they've been quick to criticise the Tories, and rightly criticise the Tories for austerity, this comprehensive spending review is nothing short of that same austerity being meted out to Scottish jobs and Scottish services up and down this country. Now, there's been much talk about independence from the SNP benches, and they are absolutely within their right to argue their opinions about what it may or may not deliver, although I would urge them to read the Growth Commission and ask them what would holding, just in a moment, public service spending to half that of economic growth really do to public spending. And while they may be entitled to their opinion on independence, they are not entitled to their own facts. And the facts are very straightforward. Since 2016, average wages in Scotland have been not just well below the UK average, they've been below Northern Ireland, they've been below Wales, apart from East Scotland. They've been below places like Manchester and Cumbria. And I'll take Jim Fairlie now, if you can answer me why average wages are so far below UK average wage increases since 2016.
Jim Fairlie.
I'm thanking very much for taking the intervention. What I'll point out to Douglas, Daniel, sorry, my apologies, Daniel, is that would you recognise, as an independent Scotland, we would have a much different position, because the Norwegian Wealth Fund is worth £2.1 million to each and every Norwegian citizen. So does the member not agree that there has been a massive wasted opportunity for the people of Scotland?
Daniel Johnson.
The oil's gone. If you had a time machine, that argument might be relevant. But we're in 2021, and we have to face facts today. And the other fact that we have to face, and Michelle Thompson is right, we have to understand the distinction between macroeconomic policy and microeconomic policy. And she is correct that largely macroeconomic policy rests with the UK government, but microeconomic policy does rest with the Scottish government. We have control over skills, over enterprise support and regional economic development. And in past decades, that has seen Scotland do very well. It has seen Scotland have productivity growth higher than the UK average. It has seen Scottish average wages grow higher than the UK average. So why is it then, with those levers that have been demonstrated to work, have those levers been failing to work in the last decade? Because that is the reality. Now, SNP members are absolutely right to point out the dreadful context that the UK finds itself. But they cannot explain why we are against obviously, and in their own words, a dreadful and incompetent government. They're not able to at least do a bit better than that. They need to explain why, against that context, we're doing worse than the UK average rather than better. If we have those levers, surely we should be able to beat the UK average in terms of skills growth, in terms of enterprise support. Instead, we have the highest spend on enterprise support and the lowest levels of productivity growth across the UK. So in closing, presiding officer, the spending review lays very clear what the Scottish Government priorities are. They're to find money for another divisive independence referendum while cutting and slashing spend elsewhere. And they, quite frankly, are completely devoid of any answers as to why they have been utterly incapable of using the levers at their disposal to grow Scottish incomes, to grow Scottish investment, and quite frankly, leaving Scots paying the highest level of tax across the United Kingdom following the introduction of the 19 pence, while receiving less for it than they would have done prior to income tax devolution. That is a fact that, frankly, few Scots should ever forgive them for. Thank you.